Let's not take a trip down memory lane of how Roger found out about masturbation.
Hi, I'm Andy,
And I'm Roger,
and welcome to The Middle,
where we try to have thoughtful conversations
about awkward topics.
on our search to find the middle.
We're going to give you last week's news today. So it's
It's a slogan we should put on a t-shirt.
Stop touching her!
I am tonight announcing my candidacy.
Taylor Swift. Look, my biggest issue with marriage is that I think that it's a fundamentally flawed institution that is built on the oppression of women.
I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny.
Having truly rational conversations about controversial issues is risky these days.
Andy,
Roger.
let me hit you with something that I found very interesting and has actually taken quite a lot of discipline to not talk to you about it or not message you when I found out this information so that we could keep a genuine reaction on air. So through a series of events in the last week, I've come to the information that, let's just, for their own protection, let's just say an acquaintance that I know, through one revelation that led to another, we've determined is a virgin. And it's not quite the story of the 40-year-old virgin, but it's close. Let's say in the ballpark, mid-30s. So it's a guy, he's grown up in Australia, he's a virgin, and more than just being a virgin, he's never touched himself.
Right.
So to me, this was absolutely shocking because actually, of all the different little socio groups and subgroups and cultures that I try to collect in my travels, I've never collected a virgin. So number one,
You're sounding a little bit like a people trafficker here.
but number one, okay, do you believe this guy?
Okay, I've
Why
got
would
two
he lie?
questions. One is there a religious element? And second, is this guy furry?
No. Well, I think furries do have sex. They're definitely dry humping. Or is it called dry humping if you're a dog? I don't know. Anyway, yes, he is religious.
Hey, that kind of pussy doesn't count.
There's too many nipples involved. Teat, rather. But to stay focused a little bit, Andy, like, yes, he is religious, but he's not he's not Amish or whatever. And on the surface, just like a normal dude. Has a normal life, nothing strange about the situation. Yeah.
Well, I won't ask how it came up because it's a bit of a weird place to go. But was there any reflection on is there aspiration to get out of it, or did it just escape this person and they're resigned to it?
Well, this was the really interesting thing, right? Because I think that we talked a little bit about adolescence and the incel culture and everything, and this guy is like the furthest thing from that, right? Like he does want to have a relationship one day. And I think it's been so long, he doesn't even see it as in terms of like sex as the goal, like in some weird pubescent way. He's an adult, he's in his mid-30s. He wants to have a relationship and start a meaningful relationship and family with someone, but he's not thinking about the fact that he's a virgin, right? And he doesn't seem to have these hang-ups or this chip on his shoulder about why, the female race has denied him that. In fact, I think that he probably sees
They're
himself...
not a race.
Sorry. He probably sees himself as part of, it's not as if it was something that wasn't afforded to him. It's just that he never did it, right? He was a willing participant, so to speak, or non-participant.
But has this person had relationships before? Or they also, they've just never had a relationship?
I don't think they've had a meaningful relationship, no.
Do they use like Tinder and that kind of stuff?
Well, that's how the conversation came up, that another person in the group was talking about their dating experiences, and then it kind of just came out that, no, he doesn't do that. And they're like, oh, why? Where do you meet you? And just one thing led to another, and he was like, well, I just don't do that. And but the weird thing is he's not bitter. He's not, and it almost seems like, I wouldn't say maybe empowering, but he definitely doesn't have shame about it. And in fact, I think there's a part of him that thinks that his abstinence from the culture of dating and online dating apps has been beneficial to him. And I guess it begs the question, is someone in their mid-30s actually old? Because maybe that's not the case anymore.
Do you think it's like one of these, is it like one of these quirky things that makes someone unique that they kind of embrace, I don't know,
Like
maybe
an
there's
identity
more,
thing?
almost how there's like more shame in being maybe someone in their mid-20s who's a virgin. But if you're like, if you're 40 and you're a virgin, it's like, hey, it's cool.
Steve Carell. I mean, I wonder how that would go down. Like, I think that there would be a lot of women who would like that scalp. I reckon if you went on there, this is like, I've
a lot of cougars.
Yeah, I've got that blue tick. I've got that verified virgin status on my dating profile. I think I reckon you get a lot of interest.
All right. So to broaden this a little bit, I genuinely believe there are people out there who are asexual, and as in they're not driven by like sexual desire. I don't know if that's quite what asexual sort of means, but is it that? Is it this person?
It doesn't seem to be. I'm sure there's a part of this where it's like a muscle, right? Like obviously the less, if it's not even on the menu, then perhaps you stop trying to order it, right? Like, so I'm sure there's some kind of atrophy of the desire when it's been so long. But no, I don't think he didn't identify as someone who just didn't have an appetite, if that's what you mean.
So I think when I kind of look around and I think of, various, even just people we went to school with or whatever, there's a little bit of a trajectory that kind of happens. You have, and this is why, like the other day when we were talking about adolescence and we were talking about the whole thing that like, hey, people do pair up. So this idea of this 80-20 rule thing, I mean, yes, it might be right in terms of desire, but it's not right in terms of practice because people do pair up. So the trajectory I'm thinking of is, yes, like 18-year-olds, you have, early bloomers and you have those a little bit laggard, right? And then let's say from that period to early 20s, usually most people they've partnered up, right? Mm-hmm. If not their life partner, but they're certainly, they're dating or whatever. But then there is this group that maybe like, say, 24, 25, haven't kind of like failure to launch, maybe is a way to put it.
Yeah.
But when they're sort of at that 25 to 30-year-old, like they usually just like figure it out somehow. Like, okay, they're like, all right, break glass in emergency. Like what, I'm going to go to the nearest church and I'm going to find the most desperate, scared that she's going to miss her window. I'm going to go in for the kill. Or rather, maybe it's probably vice versa. And then they land, and then it's all good, right?
That's you get some arbitrage on the Chinese stock exchange. No wonder there's some tariffs going on.
But people just figure it out if they want it, right? If they want it. So, but I think
there's a
some
drive
people
thing,
just
like you said, right? Like I honestly believe that there is the type of clueless male that will wander through this life probably not doing anything. But it's actually the women, like you said, the women are the ones that make it happen because they say, "I see potential in this doofus, and I'm gonna make it work."
This guy's got a job. That's all it is.
I see potential under this. This house just needs a woman's touch.
He's just passed his 12-month anniversary at McDonald's. This is good enough.
Yeah. No, but look, I think that there's that, right? Like there's the people who are driven by it. And I think for men, it is a motivation thing, right? And it's that kind of awareness of the situation. I don't know. I actually sit back and I think about this guy and I think, hey, life's pretty good. Like I don't actually, it challenges that narrative that you're nobody till someone loves you. I think that he's doing really well. And the only bit that doesn't sit right with me is the whole no touching thing. Like that bit that is more of a red flag to me than he's abstained from sex. Because I think that if you've never gone there, like I think that
is that religious?
I don't know. I mean, every religion says don't touch yourself.
Can I ask, is this person like what's the cultural background of this person?
I'm not sure what he identifies with, but he looks pretty like white as a sayo to me. You know what I'm saying? So just like, yeah, really normal, inconspicuous looking dude, right? And not even like he's just average, right? And he's average looking, average height, average existence, right? And I think that what it says to me is like, okay, I that's the part that I don't believe. The whole he's never had a wank, all right? Like to be crude, that's like seeing, a toy from the 80s, like in the packaging. Can you imagine? Like he's in his original factory condition. He hasn't broken the seal. Like the first time you have to change a car tire where you have to break the factory seal in the nut, like that's amazing. That's a collector's edition right there, right? Like that really is amazing. I reckon if he did it, he that would really hurt, I think. Seriously, man.
But like, do you think this has got to be because he's not hungry for it, right? Like, because if he's not willing to do that part of the journey, or maybe he hasn't discovered it. Like, what's the like? It's not like you necessarily like read this shit in a book and then I'll follow that set of instructions. Like, let me ask ChatGPT. Like, this isn't typically how it kind of happens, right? So
I think it happens quite naturally for most men, though, right? Like,
all right, no.
Okay. All right, let's not take a trip down memory lane of how Roger found out about masturbation. But look, come on, man. Even dogs do it. Even dogs find a way, and they don't have opposable thumbs, right? And I was just about to say, I think that's the way most boys find out how to do it too, similar to a dog.
What's the plan? What's the game plan?
I think like maybe that's white privilege.
Or do you think this is just like a ruse to like this person's found some weird form, like they've hacked the algorithm and it's worked and they just maintain the story, and meanwhile they're like,
well, it's worked on me. I don't know whether it works on any girls. I'm thinking about it. I'm curious, but I don't know whether this is. But yeah, I think this would be an ace in a hole for of sorts of a type of woman. Like absolutely. Like I can imagine a seasoned someone who's been through the trenches on Hinge and Tinder. A woman just thinking, oh my god, I would love a virgin right now. Like seriously, I would love it because they just wouldn't like. I know they wouldn't fuck me around, right? Like
literally,
yeah, it'd be like opening the seal on one of those yogurt things, right? And you lick the yogurt that's stuck on the seal. Like it'd be amazing.
Unfortunately, sometimes when you open one of those yogurt things, the yogurt prematurely splashes out. So,
but even that could be charming, because like think of the allowances you'd get being a virgin at that age, right? It'd be like riding a bicycle with the training wheels on as an adult. I just think that is a special human being. He's in his original factory settings and condition, and I think that look, I've got time for that. That must be one of the most underrepresented situations, right?
So I'm going to live on air ask ChatGPT a question, which is what proportion of the Western population die a virgin?
How could they possibly? How could ChatGPT possibly know that?
All right. General estimates. United States. According to the National Survey of Family Growth, about 1 to 2% of people die as virgins.
Oh my god, 2%?
UK. A 2019 YouGov survey found about 1 in 8 people aged 26 to 35 were still virgins.
There you go. See, maybe it is more common than we think. I mean, those numbers are astronomically high from what I would have thought, especially in the West.
In Japan, interesting to note, rates are significantly higher. A 2015 survey found about 10% of men and women aged 40 plus were still virgins. So 1 in 10, you go to Japan, 1 in 10 people over the age of 40 apparently.
Oh, that explains a lot.
So maybe it's like, maybe it's more common than... It's just no one would admit it. Like people don't admit this shit, right?
That's why maybe that's why this person is rare as well, because he's admitting it without the shame that I would assume would be surrounded. Like almost if you made it into adulthood, but you actually couldn't read or write and you were illiterate, like it'd just be this heinous weight that you'd have to carry and pretend. But
I think he's just hacked the formula.
Yeah. But anyway, hats off to you. I also think that 35 or your mid 30s is actually still very young. Right, like I actually don't think, that's that old, and that's not like a death sentence to remain a virgin by any means, right? Like, and I think a lot of people haven't found a good relationship at that in their 30s, right? That's the time to do it, and so I don't think this is going to be any significant disadvantage to this person.
Maybe we can start a GoFundMe page just in case.
What are you suggesting?
Nothing money can't fix. All right, so launch us into today's episode. Okay,
so we got into a little bit of let's say a heated argument about. There was a shushing incident, and of course it was about a topic that we haven't touched for a while actually, which is the Israel and Gaza conflict. And there's a reason we haven't spoken about it for a while. We all have our pieces. I mean, it would be clear to say that you've got a touch of Trump derangement syndrome. And you sent me a message saying that if you have TDS, then I have HDS. Hamas derangement syndrome. So I wanted to kind of go through a bit of an exercise here, just to like a middling between the two of us, an Andy and Roger middle maker, right? So what I want to try to achieve here is get to the exact point of divergence for us, right? Like in our conflict, right? So I'm going to ask you like a few statements, and then you're going to tell me whether you can agree, disagree, and to what part. I'm going to try to keep it statement driven, and we're going to try to find the point of divergence, all right?
Yep.
So first of all, does Israel have a right to exist?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Does Israel have a right to defend itself?
Yes.
Does Hamas need to be removed?
Well, yes, in theory, but not at unlimited cost.
All right. So we've got some agreement. Okay. So we agree that Israel has a right to exist, and Hamas, they have a right to defend themselves, an obligation to defend themselves, and Hamas should be removed, but the cost does matter.
Yeah, I think so. But also, I wouldn't say that the right to defend themselves is like a blank check either.
All right. So even in that, right, like how much do you think that disqualifies people from the conversation, the agreement that we have on this topic?
As in like people that would disagree with those things?
So maybe what percentage of people do you think agree with us on those three things?
I think I think there would probably be some radical people who, and they wouldn't see themselves as radical, but that would challenge the right of Israel to exist. They would go back and say, well, yeah, okay, it's set up now, so it's too late for it to be taken back. But they would probably go back to some sort of historical injustice that it was set up. The state of Israel was declared in the first place.
Next statement: do the Palestinians have a right of return?
I think there's probably a bit of complexity and nuance to that. The nearest analogy that I can think of to that question, it's like maybe there's a more symbolic aspect to it. So it's the equivalent of, the like the Mabo case here in Australia, where you've got to be practical and pragmatic enough to know that Palestinians who were whose families were displaced, however many years ago, like aren't going to be returning to the family home that they were in that whatever part of what is now Israel, in the way that they want to. But at the same time, you might acknowledge in some way or have some form of, whether it's reparations or some form of like acknowledgement of impact. So it's probably more nuanced than a yes or no.
Well, let me sharpen it to the hardest version you can agree with. If there is identifiable proof that displaced Palestinians have the rights to certain geographic or property in Israel proper, that they have the right of return.
Well, again, it depends. Like if for 60, 70, how many years are we talking? Like 70, 80 years? They've not, that for whatever reason they've not been there, then, and we're talking about children of children of children, like multiple generations or whatever.
Yep.
It's basically a conversation about the divergence between what's maybe like right in principle or morally or ethically in the minds of people versus what's practical and pragmatic. And it's clearly not practical to take a group of people who currently live over here and to sort of say to like all the water that's flown on, got under the bridge, that after, by the way, the family that's in that, on that land or whatever, we've got to kick them out and for this other family to move in, who, by the way, weren't even alive back whatever originally.
So is that version of moving back into the same house that we've traced back in Israel proper a no?
Well, it's a no on pragmatic grounds, but it's not a no it's not saying that you can't like understand where they're coming from, or that maybe there is some case to be made and you look at alternatives, or you do things that are more symbolic and so on. And again, you would only do that if you had some sort of like, single unified state. We're all going to, be friends now, and we've all come to the conclusion that all of this conflict everyone's been having is really not great. So let's just unite again. And, which is obviously not the world we're in, right? So,
okay. Yep. Look, I'm aligned with that. All right. Let's move on to one more statement. Do you believe that the October 7th event represented murders, rapes, abduction of the elderly and infants by Hamas and also Palestinians of Gaza.
Yeah, of course.
Do you believe that Bibi Netanyahu has committed war crimes?
I don't know enough to say because I'm not close enough. I haven't followed it closely enough to say with any certainty. But I think if you define war crimes to some sort of like letter of the law, then I think it's probably hard to engage in war of any kind and not have certain things happen up a grave, for example, like where you have that kind of stuff happens, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if the answer is yes, but maybe that to me is not even the relevant question. The relevant question isn't how polite the war is. The relevant question is how damaging, destructive, and impactful it is on the communities.
Mm-hmm. Do you believe Hamas has committed war crimes?
Yes.
Okay, what about the following statement that the IDF have targeted civilians?
I don't think they've targeted civilians, or not to my knowledge, or at least I wouldn't think that they would. But again, that to me is not necessarily the relevant question. It would be more of whether they targeting you can sort of not target a civilian, but you can also not have regard for if civilians are collateral damage or not.
What about the following statement? The IDF have not done enough to limit civilian casualties.
I would probably say that I don't have enough knowledge to answer yes or no. There would be people who would say they should have done more and would have good reasons to say that. And I think there would be people who would say, well, they've done more than what happens in most conflicts. So I don't think there's a clear answer to that. And even if you are across it, but I'm not across it enough to say either way.
All right. Now we're getting to the bit that I think we disagree with, because I agree with you everything up until now, even the ones that are just a bit maybe-ish. Do you believe that the removal of Hamas is in Israel's strategic interests?
I think if you could just, click your fingers and Hamas is gone with a surgical intervention in Gaza, then yeah, probably would be. But again, it's the cost of doing it. And I think the reason I would say that maybe the approach that has been taken isn't necessarily in the long run best interests of Israel is that I think Hamas is yes, it has it's a thing, in terms of people and an organizational structure and all that, but it's really also just like a suite of ideas. It's a thought system. And I don't think you get rid of Hamas by killing the current custodians of those ideas and that thought system. I think in some ways, I presume there will be a population of Palestinians living in Gaza in the future. And I think in some ways it's like whack-a-mole. And I don't think you can get rid of the ideas that underpin Hamas by getting rid of people who are from Hamas.
So if I can kind of sharpen it up, do you believe in the statement that Israel are creating more terrorists than they are removing?
Well, you have to have a game plan, right? You have to know what's the end state here, right? So if the end state is ongoing occupation, like permanent sort of police force sort of style, we're going to really truly, make sure the blockade really truly works. We're going to, we're not even going to have a blockade because we control everything now. We don't even need a blockade because we're so pervasively. So if that's the plan, then maybe that works. But I don't know what the end plan is. I don't know what how that plan kind of, the Riviera of the Middle East, like the Trump plan for Gaza. I don't know if that's in Israel's best interests. They've got other neighbors as well to work with. So I think a lot of this stuff is very complicated and it's not necessarily one that I can directly answer. But I think when we did speak about this earlier in the week, one of the key reasons I don't think this is in Israel's best interests or strategic interests is because I think the motivation for decisions that are being made today, or at least that have been made, are predominantly guided by what's in Netanyahu's best interests, and from a political perspective, and which means the war's gone on longer than it perhaps has needed to, that decisions have been made that might be good for him politically, but not necessarily good for Israel in the longer term, and that maybe even just the outpouring of grief during that time, immediately after October 7, lured the population into doing things that maybe seemed right at the time, but that ultimately may not be.
All right, I'm going to concede some points from across the fence just to see what you think. We haven't spoken about some of the stuff, but the statement that the Israeli government have used Hamas as a cover to take off the table negotiations leading to a two-state solution. Do you agree with that? That statement?
I'm not a conspiracy theorist about any of this stuff, so I know that people have said that. I've heard that, but I don't have I don't know enough about Israeli politics to know the answer to that. But it's plausible, but I don't have a strong view either way.
The settlements in the West Bank are illegal and counterproductive.
I think they're definitely counterproductive.
Okay, I think that's like the most dispassionate view of this conversation that I can muster. I think that if we're aligned on all those things, then I'd be very happy with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think a theme in my view of the world is consequences, actions and consequences matter, and sometimes justice or notions of justice or what's right in principle or the principle of a thing get in the way of, they can cloud that they actually shouldn't be part of the algorithm or the equation, the optimization of a problem and its solutions, that they actually just cloud and confuse. So, and I think this goes for everything in life, right? Where at the end of the day, there's a suite of options available to you, and you've got to look at all of the different options, and among those options, there is going to be one that, on whatever your criteria are in terms of your objectives and what's right. So if you're Israel, there will be a objective function and a suite of options that's right for Israel. If you're not in Israel and you're seeking to judge the situation, as I think we are, dispassionately, as no skin in the game, but like, what are we comfortable with as third-party observers, we'll also have maybe a different take on that. But at the end of the day, notions of like, yes, this bad thing happened, and what was it, 2,000 people were very brutally and quite horrifically, like, not just, 2,000 people died in some kind of, faceless sort of, these were quite horrific, and so therefore there's blank checks all around to do whatever the fuck in response, I think is not right. Like, I think at the end of the day,
I'd agree. Yeah, of course.
You've got to look at, if you do this, then this will happen. Therefore, it's a shit option. So don't do it.
There are some kind of mirror images here in the Ukraine-Russia conflict where, we were speaking, and there's a school of thought. Let's take us out from the minute. There's a school of thought that says, hey, people are dying. They're in a gridlock. The best outcome is for people just to stop dying. And if that requires a little bit of, land for peace, or a little bit of giving Putin a little bit of what he wants, because that's the nature of negotiations and compromise, then that is worth it for people to stop dying. There's a mirror image to that with the way that Hamas is using the asymmetry in this warfare, that actually if you use your civilian infrastructure to shield you because of the nature of civilized war and so on, then that is a untenable situation that you can reward that. Because as soon as you let that tactic be used, there are larger implications, just like there are larger implications of appeasement to Putin when it comes to Ukraine. So I think it's a very hard situation. There are mirror images there for people on both sides of this discussion, that actually that's a really good way, because it's that bipartisan view of, culturally, the right wing of America are kind of wanting this ceasefire, and if Putin has to have a little bit of something, he has to have a little bit of something, that's a deal we want to take. But yet they very much support Israel doing what they need to do with Hamas. And that's the kind of like cultural thing, right? Like, you can't reward a strategy where terrorists hold up a baby so you can't shoot, right?
I do agree there's a lot of mirror images, but of the two conflicts, the more compelling case to hold firm on is actually the Ukraine-Russia one, and the reasons are because you have risks of escalating conflicts to other border countries. Russia is a much bigger power and is much more capable of doing different things. Plus, Russia is still operating as a state actor, whereas well, hang on. Whereas a lot of the people we're talking about, like in Gaza, like it's like borderline guerrilla warfare, right? And decentralized actors rather than the emperor makes the decisions at the top, sort of thing. So
Sinwar's dead now.
Yeah, but there'll be someone to replace him, So I think in some ways you can say, like, and I agree, there are mirror parallels, but you could say, well, look, yeah, we've got this fucking basket case of and that's really frankly why it hasn't been resolved today. Like, it could have been resolved 50 years ago, but it wasn't. And it's still around today because it's an intractable problem.
Yeah.
Is that you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. You go after it, and then and then what? Like, are we
I
talking
agree with
about
your comments around the compelling nature of the Ukraine-Russia side because of the stakes, but I do think that you can't forget that Hamas are literally saying, to this day, they're saying, we will keep on doing October the 7th, any chance that we can get, right? Like, this is not a situation where it's like, oh, they're not even pretending like Putin is, whereas I just want to liberate the Donbass, right?
Yeah.
Like, they're literally saying, this is what we want to do. We're going to keep on doing it, right?
Yeah, well, but I think it's just Well, and Putin's got a track record of not just doing that one small piece.
Agreed.
Like and also the stakes are far higher because Putin actually could cause a lot of grievances for other countries in that region. But like, I guess it's like, what is the infrastructure for Hamas in Gaza, right? What kind of capabilities do they have? Because intent and desire and ambition,
A lot of rockets flying.
Yeah, but like, once you've destroyed that capability, and then does it just getting rid of the people who say it out loud mean that there aren't all the people who are going to replace them aren't going to? I just think in this, and I bet you 100%. They'll get rid of Hamas, but who's going to replace them? Like the friendly, like the pro-Israeli government that's been there all along, that just the government in exile. That
it's a very unfair, but it's another choice that the Gazans have to make.
Yeah, but you're not going to get rid of. If anything, this conflict has only emboldened.
Yeah. All I'm saying though is, like, when people when you hear this strong reaction to like, the Israelis are targeting, and I know you've already considered that point, but the Israelis are targeting civilians and they're doing this. It's like, you have to acknowledge the tactics around this asymmetrical warfare with the terrorist sides, right? Like, they are literally shielding themselves with the civilians, and you're in such a bind because you cannot allow that tactic to play that they're using.
But then that's again, like, that goes to the point of, like, justice and out of principle and what's right. Like, yes, it's relevant to say, like, Hamas, it bears all of the responsibility for that, but there's still a decision that can be made, right? And I mean, it's like police have to make decisions like this on a daily basis. Like, do you have the high speed chase when the criminal has taken a hostage and has a gun to the head of an innocent bystander? Like, what do you do? What decision do you make? And as a responsible police force, you would say, well, we're going to back off, because if that's going to protect the innocent bystander that's being held hostage, we don't want to exacerbate this person to cause further threats. So so there's, like, but it doesn't mean that the police are at fault for that they should just keep going for the criminal, because you can't, like, incentivize that as a tactic. Yeah. So there's just these, like, there's these nuances which are a little bit more where it's a little bit more complicated, I think, sometimes. But yeah, anyway,
I agree, and I pointed out that the mirror image of this in the Ukraine conflict, just because on cultural lines they want different things, and that'd be a good way of the parties seeing that, because they both are at conflict with some of that logic in terms of culturally what they support as outcomes for, say, the United States intervening in these two arenas, right?
Yeah. Well, it's, I think, more an exhibition of the inconsistency and complete arbitrary moronic nature of the Trump administration than anything else. All right. Well, I hope I've satisfied you that I'm not a lover of Hamas and, yeah.
On a real note, though, do you think anyone that attends a pro-Palestinian rally would agree with any of those statements that we agree with?
I just think they don't like dead babies at the end of the day, which is fair enough.
That's fair enough.
All right. See you later.